More than 100 years ago, we held that when an employment contract does not specify a time period or its duration, either party is ordinarily at liberty to terminate it at will on giving reasonable notice of his intention to do so. This was the statement of the Virginia Supreme Court in 2016 regarding the issue of at-will employment in the Commonwealth, and the recent decision in Texas regarding healthcare workers compelled to submit to compulsory vaccinations places the issue on whether even Arlington Public Schools can compel teachers, administrators, and staff to submit to being vaccinated as an agency of the state, which has not yet even mandated vaccines, but also how this issue plays out in the private sector, where perhaps they are free to entertain spending 3-day weekends to attempt to persuade, coax, and cajole 1,000 employees to get vaccinated. Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb. At the outset, let me state that I am not an attorney by God, and this is not, shall we say, legal advice, so much as a common sense approach based upon what we shall frame as considerable experience and intimate familiarity with both law and public health crises. So, for the next few moments, we shall explore the paradigm that has been presented in the press as a no-win situation in at-will employment with regard to compulsory vaccines, and prayerfully, if you should find yourself on the wrong side of a judge in a court, you will not have to save face with a press release about appealing all the way to the Supreme Court to hide the embarrassing fact that you actually had no case to present at all. Oh dear God. Well, Green not only decided to grab a good attorney, but also literally take the fifth. Not so much to avoid self-incrimination, but to argue that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Think like a lawyer. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And attorneys might even describe this as a takings case. You took my stuff. Green's attorneys argued that the alleged property is petitioner's employment. The alleged liberty is petitioner's freedom to practice his chosen profession in pursuit of happiness. And government attorneys rather eloquently argued in reply that although the right to hold specific private employment and to follow a chosen profession free from the unreasonable governmental interference comes within the liberty and property concepts of the Fifth Amendment, they diplomatically contended, dare say, that the admitted interferences which had occurred as to Green were but indirect byproducts of necessary governmental action, de minimis, to protect the integrity of secret information, and hence were not unreasonable, nor did they of necessity constitute deprivations within the meaning of the Fifth Amendment. But that was 1959. That was 1959, before the war on poverty had commenced. And by 1970, when the Supreme Court decided the case of Goldberg v. Kelly, in a footnote reference, ordinarily which one might only cite as a mere dicta, not really law, a new progressive paradigm had emerged for the expanding federal government as it announced in the most liberal construction that it may be realistic today to regard welfare entitlements as more like property than a gratuity. Much of the existing wealth in this country takes the form of rights that do not fall within the traditional common law concepts of property, and hence as what is often referred to now as property-like rights, not even your welfare can be stripped away without being afforded due process or just compensation. Liberally construed. One enjoyment of right in property is the liberty to do with one's property as he or she wishes. And accordingly, if the government had provided a property-like right to free vaccination, as a citizen in full enjoyment of that right would even enjoy the right to refuse the same, to delay the same, to do whatever one will, making a job requirement to exercise that right or suffer the consequences of termination and interference with that right to property, would it not? Liberally construed. think like a lawyer. But essentially, it's not the truly relevant inquiry whether or not, by consenting to being administered the vaccination, one would reasonably expect to accrue a personal health benefit in safety from infection, like all the smiling employees at the Arlington Public Schools. Avoidance of an unsafe condition, of foregoing full and immediate enjoyment of that government entitlement program. Well, according to the intermediate report on vaccine quote-unquote effectiveness that was published on April 2nd by the CDC after a review of almost 4,000 frontline workers in healthcare and first responders between December 2020 and March 2021 in 8 cities. They found that fully vaccinated persons would reduce their chance of infection by 90% or reduce their risk to attack by a pathogen with only a 10% success rate, while those who took only the first dose would reduce the chance of success for COVID-19 against them to 20%. But oddly, and not widely publicized or even actually printed nor emphasized in the report, your chances of having COVID-19 infect you without the vaccine was only 12%, only 2 points lower than being fully vaccinated, and statistically safer than receiving only one dose, which raises very serious questions about the credibility of that study, which may have suffered fatal sampling bias errors to produce a result like throwing out 33 cases that they didn't like. Somewhat obvious at the start, unless you might also not find it unusual to find the majority of frontline healthcare workers in a random sample of 4,000 persons in 8 locations across the United States being mainly white females, with the highest incidence of infections among Hispanic men. Black Lives Matter. This briefing is unclassified, as you will. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington Public School Board. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our schools. Honest. Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.